Hello, my name is Corey Douglas, 35 years old. I'm standing in front of the massive wrought iron gates of my grandfather's mansion, my fingers slipping into the pocket of my old jacket, feeling the worn fabric that's been with me for a decade. The June breeze blows through the ancient oak trees in Ware, Georgia, carrying the scent of pine and memories. I take a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My 2005 Ford pickup, with its peeling silver paint, sits alone among a row of gleaming luxury cars under the afternoon sun. Mercedes BMWs and a shiny new Tesla that I'm guessing belongs to my brother, Jake. The annual Douglas Family Conference is about to begin. And as always, the feeling of being an outsider among my own kin stirs within me. The mansion before me is more than just a house. It's a symbol of the Douglas family, built from the sweat and ambition of my grandfather, Walter Douglas. The moss-covered gray stone walls, the faded red-tiled roof, and the stained glass windows glimmer as if recounting the story of a timber and construction materials empire that made the Douglas name legendary in Ware since the 1950s. But today, this house is no longer the warm gathering place my grandfather once dreamed of. It has become an arena, a stage where my relatives flaunt their wealth, investment portfolios, and sly jabs aimed at the poor one like me. I tighten my grip on the new leather briefcase, the only thing that doesn't match my outfit: a light blue dress shirt, faded jeans, and scuffed brown leather shoes. Inside the briefcase is the secret I've kept for 3 years, documents proving I'm not the failure my family thinks I am. I'm ready to change the way they, especially my father, Henry Douglas, see me. But my heart is pounding, not out of fear, but from the smoldering anger mixed with the pain of years spent being mocked and belittled in this very house. "Corey, late again, huh?" a voice calls out from the porch, snapping me out of my thoughts. Jake, my older brother, stands there with a smirk, holding a glass of red wine, his perfectly tailored gray suit accentuating his tall frame. He's the spitting image of our father, from the icy stare to the condescending tone. "Come on, that rusty truck still runs? I bet you've spent a fortune keeping it alive." I give a faint smile, stepping through the gate, trying not to let his jab get to me. "It still gets me here, Jake. That's enough," I reply evenly, though inside I want to shout that this truck carried me through the toughest days when I started my business from nothing, when this entire family turned their backs on me. Inside the mansion, the air is thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the sound of boisterous laughter. The Douglas Family Conference is unlike any other reunion. This is where cousins, aunts, uncles, and distant relatives I only see once a year gather to support one another. At least that was my grandfather's original idea. Walter founded this conference in the 1980s, hoping the Douglas generations would unite, share finances, career opportunities, and build a legacy together. But when he passed away in 2005, everything changed. My father, Henry Douglas, who inherited the role of presiding over the conference, turned it into a stage for boasting, where wealth determines a person's worth. I step into the grand living room where light from the crystal chandelier bathes the elegantly dressed faces. My cousin Sophia, in a tight red dress and a sparkling diamond necklace, is talking about her Maldives vacation. Uncle David, who owns a chain of hotels in Atlanta, brags about his new yacht, and my father, Henry, sits at the head of the long walnut table, his gaze sharp as a blade, reviewing a stack of papers, probably someone's investment portfolio. Voting rights in the conference are based on declared wealth, and my father, with 40% of the voting power, always holds the ultimate authority. I, with my modest declared assets, at least as far as they know, have only 3%. Just enough to be invited, but not enough for anyone to listen. "Corey, sit down," my father says, his voice low but cold, not looking up from his papers. "Wearing that shirt again? I've told you how many times to dress like a proper Douglas." The room falls silent for a second, followed by a few stifled chuckles. I feel the probing stares, the mocking smiles. I pull out a chair, sit down, and place the briefcase on my lap, my fingers lightly brushing its worn leather. "I think this shirt's fine, Dad," I reply, my voice soft but firm. "It's comfortable." My father snorts, shaking his head. Comfort won't give you a voice here, Corey. You know the rules. He taps the table, his eyes sweeping the room like a king surveying his court. Today we're discussing the sale of this mansion. I've received an offer from a corporation looking to build a resort. The price is excellent. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Sell the mansion? The house my grandfather poured his heart into building, the place filled with memories of summer days running through the garden, listening to him talk about starting with a small sawmill. I want to speak up, but I know with my 3% voting power, my words would be dismissed instantly. Henry, are you sure about this? A deep voice rises from the end of the table. It's Uncle Robert, my father's youngest brother, the only one in the family who dares to openly challenge him. He sits there in a simple dress shirt, his salt and pepper hair and kind smile standing out. This mansion is Dad's legacy. Do you think he'd want us to sell it? My father's eyes narrow, his icy stare fixed on Uncle Robert. Robert, don't romanticize it. This is a business opportunity. With this money, we can invest in bigger projects. Your 9% voting power isn't enough to change anything. Uncle Robert presses his lips together but says nothing more. I look at him, sensing the empathy in his eyes. He's the only one besides my mother who ever supported the path I chose, leaving the family timber business to pursue my passion for biotechnology. But even he doesn't know the secret I'm holding in this briefcase. The conference begins, and as always, I sit quietly listening to my relatives boast. Sophia talks about her new investment in a Silicon Valley tech startup. Jake brags about buying a penthouse in Miami. Every word, every smile from them feels like a knife reminding me of the years I've been looked down upon. Corey, you're still running that food company or whatever? Sophia asks, her voice sweet but dripping with sarcasm. I hear startups like that fail fast. I smile, nodding. It's doing fine, Sophia, thanks for asking. But inside, I'm counting down. 2 days from now, at the final meeting, I'll reveal the truth that my sustainable food startup, the one they mocked, is now valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. That I, Corey Douglas, the family's supposed failure, hold $95 million in assets, roughly 40% of the voting power. And that I'll use that power to protect my grandfather's legacy. That night, I lie on the old bed in the small second-floor room of the mansion, listening to the crickets chirping in the garden. The briefcase sits beside me, a reminder of tomorrow. I think of my mother, who always believed in me, and my grandfather, who taught me that true value lies not in the money in your bank account, but in how you live and what you leave behind. I close my eyes, feeling anger and determination rise within me. 2 days from now, this family will know who Corey Douglas really is. I wake up as the first light of dawn filters through the thin curtains of the small room in the mansion. The cheerful chirping of birds in the garden reminds me of childhood summer mornings when I was a barefoot boy running across the lawn, clutching a homemade kite, with my grandfather Walter by my side. Back then, this house wasn't an arena of scheming and boasting. It was a place where I felt love, connection, and the simple lessons my grandfather etched into my heart. But this morning, as I sit up, slip on my old leather shoes and glance at the leather briefcase on the table, I know those memories are now just a faint glow in a family that has changed. I walk down the wooden staircase, each creaking step telling the story of the Douglas family, a story I know by heart, not just because I'm part of it, but because it's been the driving force behind my quiet pursuit of my own path. The Douglas family wasn't always about driving luxury cars, flaunting investment portfolios, or vying for voting power. We were once workers, dreamers with nothing but our bare hands, and it all began with my grandfather, Walter Douglas. I sit down at the breakfast table in the spacious kitchen where the aroma of coffee mingles with the rustle of the newspaper Uncle Robert is reading. It's just the two of us here. The rest of the family, as usual, prefers to sleep in or dine in the formal dining room with its silk tablecloths and silver cutlery. Uncle Robert looks up, smiling at me, his warm eyes seeming to ask, "You okay, Corey?" I nod, grabbing a piece of toast, but my mind drifts to the past, to the man who built all of this. Grandpa Walter was born in 1925, raised in a poor farming family on the outskirts of Ware, Georgia. Back then, Ware was a small town where people lived off farming or working in sawmills. Grandpa had nothing but the strength of his hands and a head full of ideas. At 18, he enlisted, fought in World War II, and returned in 1945 with not only war scars but an ironclad resolve to build a better life for his future family. He started with a small sawmill, bought with a bank loan and the little savings he'd scraped together from odd jobs. "Nobody believed in me, Corey," he once told me, his eyes lighting up as he recalled those early days. "They said I was crazy to think a country boy could compete with the big shots in Atlanta. But I wasn't doing it for the money. I was doing it to leave something for my kids and grandkids." Grandpa's sawmill grew quickly. He didn't just sell lumber, he innovated, creating new building materials like fire-resistant plywood and treated wood that could withstand Georgia's humid climate. By the 1950s, Douglas lumber had become a household name in the American South. Grandpa didn't stop there. He invested in land, buying forests to secure a timber supply, and built modern manufacturing plants. By the time I was born in 1990, the Douglas family was an empire, with this mansion, designed by Grandpa himself, as a symbol of his success. But what I admired most about Grandpa wasn't his wealth or fame. It was the way he lived. He always wore simple flannel shirts, drove an old pickup truck, and spent time teaching me how to build tables and chairs in the woodworking shed out back. "Money is a tool, Corey," he'd say, his voice warm and steady. "It helps you build a house, feed a family, but if you let it define who you are, you've already lost." He believed family was the foundation, that true wealth lay not in the bank but in how we treat each other. The idea for the family conference came in 1980 when Grandpa realized his empire was growing, and his children and grandchildren were starting to forge their own paths. He had 4 children: my father, Henry, the eldest, Aunt Margaret, an interior designer in Savannah, Uncle David, who runs a hotel chain, and Uncle Robert, the youngest, a modest civil engineer living in Athens, Georgia. Grandpa worried that success might pull the family apart, so he established the Douglas Family Conference, an annual gathering for everyone to come together, share about their lives and work, and support one another. I still remember the early conferences when I was just a boy sitting at Grandpa's feet listening to him, Grandma and my aunts and uncles talk. Back then, the conference wasn't about voting rights or portfolios. It was cozy family dinners with mashed potatoes and barbecue made by Grandma. Aunts and uncles shared their struggles, like when Uncle David nearly went bankrupt on a failed hotel project, or when Aunt Margaret needed capital to open her design studio. Grandpa always listened, offered advice, and sometimes quietly helped with money or connections. "We're a family," he'd say. "If one of us falls, the whole family lifts them up." I loved those days. I loved how Grandpa looked at everyone with respect, no matter how rich or poor they were. I loved how he'd call me out to the garden, show me the oak trees he planted when my father was young, and say, "One day, Corey, you'll be the one to carry these values forward." I believed him. But then, in 2005, he passed away from a heart attack, just as I turned 15. And with his death, the dream of a united family began to fade. My father, Henry, took over as the conference's presiding figure. As the eldest, he always carried the pressure of continuing Grandpa's legacy. But he did it in his own way, a way I believe Grandpa would never have approved of. Dad is a strict, rigid man who believes wealth is the sole measure of success. He runs Douglas Lumber with an iron fist, expanding it into a multinational corporation. But in doing so, he turned the family conference into something entirely foreign. I remember the first conference after Grandpa's death in 2006. I was 16, still grieving his loss, but excited to see the family again. I thought the conference would be like before, stories, hugs, and encouragement. Instead, I saw Dad standing at the head of the table holding a large ledger, demanding everyone declare their assets. He announced that from now on, voting rights in the conference would be based on wealth to reflect each person's contribution to the family. I didn't understand what was happening, only felt my mother, who always supported me, squeeze my hand under the table, her eyes filled with worry. Dad's new rule changed everything. Warm conversations turned into presentations about portfolios, real estate, and profits. Those with the most money, like Dad with 40% voting power, or Uncle David with 15%, became the center of attention. People like my mother, who didn't work in business, or Uncle Robert, who lived simply, were pushed to the margins. And me, a 16-year-old kid with nothing to my name, had just 1% voting power, a number that made me feel invisible. But the most painful part was how Dad treated me. He openly criticized me in front of the family, saying I was lazy, unambitious, that I wasn't worthy of the Douglas name. "Corey, if you keep daydreaming, you'll never have a place in this family," he'd say, his voice cold. I wanted to scream that I wasn't daydreaming, that I had big plans, that I wanted to do something meaningful like Grandpa did. But I stayed silent. I stayed silent because back then I had nothing to prove. Back to the present. I take a sip of coffee, feeling a bitter sting in my throat. Uncle Robert sets down his newspaper, looking at me with a searching gaze. "What's on your mind, Corey?" he asked gently. I give a faint smile, shaking my head. "Just thinking about Grandpa. I wonder what he'd think if he saw the conference now." Uncle Robert sighs, his eyes distant. "He'd be heartbroken, Corey, but he'd be proud of you. You're more like him than anyone in this house." His words make my heart ache. I think about the times I cried alone in this room after conferences, where Jake mocked me, Sophia sneered at me, and Dad looked at me like a failure. I think about my mother, who held me and told me I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. And I think about the leather briefcase upstairs holding my secret, my sustainable food startup, built from nothing, now valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't just want to save Grandpa's mansion. I want to reclaim my voice, to show my father, Jake, and this entire family that the number in my bank account doesn't define who I am. The second day of the conference is about to begin. I know that today my father will push harder for the proposal to sell the mansion. I also know that with my 3% voting power, I can't do anything yet. But I have a plan. I've contacted my lawyer, prepared the documents, and on the final day, I'll reveal the truth. I'll show them that Corey Douglas is not a failure, and I'll protect my grandfather's legacy with everything I have. I stand up, holding my coffee mug, and look out at the garden where my grandfather's oak trees still stand strong after all these years. "Grandpa," I whisper, "I won't let you down." Uncle Robert approaches from behind, patting my shoulder. "Ready for today, Corey?" "I'm not sure ready is the right word, Uncle," I reply, sitting down on a wooden chair nearby. "But I'll get through it, like every year." Uncle Robert nods, his eyes full of empathy. "Just stay strong. Henry may be tough, but he's not the whole world." I want to believe him, but as I step into the main meeting room where my father has set up a large screen and a thick stack of documents, my chest tightens. Dad sits at the head of the table as always, like a king on his throne, in a deep navy suit and with a piercing gaze. Jake, my brother, sits to his right, typing something on his phone, probably bragging about his new penthouse to his friends. Sophia, my cousin, sits across from me, her red lips curling into a mocking smile as I enter. The others, Uncle David, Aunt Margaret, and a few distant relatives, are all present, but none of them look at me for more than a few seconds. I'm used to being invisible. "Sit down, Corey," my father says, his voice low but sharp as a blade. "We have a lot to discuss today, and I don't want to waste time." I pull out a chair, place my briefcase on my lap, and try to keep a calm expression. But inside, I'm bracing myself for what's coming. The second day of the conference is always when my father pushes his big plans. Business ventures, investments, or like today, the proposal to sell my grandfather's mansion for a resort. I heard him mention it yesterday, but today he'll present the details, and I know I can't stay silent. The second day's meeting begins. My father stands, tapping his ballpoint pen lightly on the table to draw attention. Today, we'll discuss the future of this mansion in earnest. He starts, his voice echoing through the room. The Riverside Corporation has made a generous offer, $25 million for this land plus shares in the luxury resort they plan to build. This is an opportunity for the Douglas family to expand our influence, to transform my father's legacy into something modern, more profitable. A few scattered claps echo. Jake nods, a smug smile spreading across his face. Brilliant, Dad. A resort will elevate our name. I've seen the designs. It'll be a high-end destination for the elite. My blood rushes to my head. Sell the mansion? Turn my grandfather's home, filled with memories, into a resort for wealthy strangers? I want to stand, to shout, but I know I need to wait. Right now, my words would be no more than a breeze passing by their ears. I glance at Uncle Robert, who's frowning, his hand gripping his teacup tightly. Henry, don't you think we should consider this more carefully? Uncle Robert speaks up, his voice low but firm. This mansion isn't just property. It's the heart of our family. Dad built it for us to come together, not to be sold off. My father snorts, his eyes flashing with irritation. Robert, you're always so sentimental. This is business, not a fairy tale. Your 9% voting power isn't enough to stand in the way. Sophia lets out a giggle. Uncle Robert, I get that you love this house, but we have to move forward. Who still lives like it's the old days? She glances at me, her eyes glinting with mockery. Except Corey, maybe? The room erupts in laughter. Jake claps, looking at me with a wicked grin. Exactly, Corey. You're still living like Grandpa, aren't you? With that rusty pickup and that shirt from the last century? I grip my briefcase tightly, forcing myself to stay calm. I live the way I think is right, Jake, I reply, my voice steady but cold. Not everyone needs a Tesla to feel important. The room falls silent for a moment, then Jake bursts out laughing. Listen to that tone. Still bitter about not having money, Corey? Maybe you should sell that pathetic food company of yours and scrape together some cash for a decent suit. Jake's words cut like a knife. My face burns, but I don't respond. Not because I have nothing to say, but because I know my moment hasn't come. Tomorrow, when I reveal my $95 million in assets, equivalent to about 40% voting power, Jake won't be laughing anymore. My father bangs the table, cutting off the exchange. Enough, Corey. If you have nothing to contribute, stay quiet and listen. We're discussing serious matters. I bite my lip, feeling as if I've been slapped. But a memory from another conference 5 years ago floods back, vivid and painful as if it happened yesterday. In 2020, I was 30, 3 years into starting my sustainable food company. The business was growing, but I lived frugally, saving every penny to invest in research. That year's conference took place as the family's timber company, Douglas Lumber, faced challenges due to a volatile construction materials market. My father, as chairman, proposed a risky strategy, taking on a massive loan to invest in a new lumber plant in South America, where labor costs were low but political instability was high. I had studied the proposal thoroughly. I read reports, analyzed the market, and realized my father's plan could push the company toward bankruptcy if the market crashed. During the second day's meeting, I stood up, daring to speak in front of the entire family for the first time. Dad, I think this plan is too risky, I said, my voice trembling but resolute. If we invest in South America now and the market shifts, the company could lose everything. We should focus on upgrading technology at our existing plants. The room went silent, but not because they agreed. They looked at me as if I'd said something foolish. Jake laughed loudly. Corey, what do you know about business? You're still struggling with that pathetic startup of yours. Sophia chimed in. Exactly. How much voting power do you have? 2% or 3%? Sit down, Corey. But I didn't sit. I looked straight at my father, hoping he'd listen. Dad, I've done the research. I know what I'm talking about. We can't take this risk. My father stood, his gaze burning. Corey, you're wasting everyone's time. You don't have enough voting power to speak here. If you don't be quiet, you'll leave. I tried to say more, but he cut me off. "Enough!" he shouted, pointing at the door. "Get out, Corey, you don't belong here." I stood frozen, feeling like the world had collapsed. I looked around, searching for a sympathetic glance, but found only mocking smiles and indifferent stares. Even Uncle Robert, the only one who supported me, just bowed his head, powerless. I walked out of the room carrying humiliation and wordless anger. That night, I drove back to Atlanta, vowing never to return to the conference again. But the next year, I heard that Douglas Lumber suffered millions in losses due to the failed South American investment. The plant stalled amid political unrest, and the company had to sell assets to pay off debt. No one apologized to me. No one acknowledged I was right. My father only said in a later meeting that mistakes are lessons, then carried on as if nothing had happened. But I didn't forget. That scar remains, and every time I step into this meeting room, it stings. The memory of 2020 makes me grip my briefcase tighter. Today, as my father continues presenting the resort plan, I feel the old anger rising. "I propose we hold a preliminary vote today," he says, his voice commanding. "Who supports selling the mansion, raise your hand." Jake, Sophia, Uncle David, and a few others raise their hands immediately. Uncle Robert shakes his head, keeping his hands on the table. I don't raise my hand, but I know it changes nothing. With 3% voting power, I'm invisible. "Corey, opposing again?" my father asks, his gaze icy. "Do you have anything to say, or are you just wasting everyone's time again?" I take a deep breath, looking straight at him. "Dad, this house is Grandpa's legacy. Selling it, we're not just losing property, we're losing what this family means." Jake laughs loudly. "Oh, come on, listen to that moralizing tone. Corey, do you even know how much money this resort will bring? Or are you still dreaming about the good old days?" "Jake, not everyone measures value by money," I reply, my voice calm but sharp. "Grandpa built this house for us to come together, not to turn it into a commodity." My father slams the table, cutting me off. "Corey, enough! You have no authority here. If you don't agree, sit quietly and let the adults talk." His words hit like a punch to the chest. I want to stand, to scream and tell everyone about my $95 million fortune. But I hold back because my plan is to reveal it on the final day. I glance at Uncle Robert, who gives a subtle nod as if saying, "Wait, Corey. Your moment is coming." After the meeting, I head to the garden, finding a quiet spot under an old oak tree. Uncle Robert follows, sitting beside me. "You okay?" he asks. "I'm tired, Uncle," I admit, my voice hoarse. "Tired of being looked down on, mocked, but I won't let them win." Uncle Robert puts a hand on my shoulder. "Stay calm and wait for the right moment." "Do you already have a plan?" I look at him, hesitating. Then I decide to trust him. "I have $95 million in assets," I say, lowering my voice. "My startup. It's more successful than they think. Tomorrow I'll announce it and I'll veto the sale of the mansion." Uncle Robert's eyes light up and he laughs, a proud, hearty laugh. "Well, I'll be damned." Uncle Robert's eyes light up and he laughs, a proud, hearty laugh. "Well, I'll be damned. You really are Walter Douglas's grandson. Your father won't know what hit him." We sit there, sharing memories of Grandpa, of the values that have been lost. I feel a weight lift, as if I've shed a burden. Tomorrow I'll face the entire family, my father and myself. I'll reclaim my voice, and I'll protect my grandfather's legacy. That night, I lie on the old bed in the small room, moonlight filtering through the curtains, casting a glow on the leather briefcase sitting on the table. The chirping of crickets in the garden is like a lullaby, but I can't sleep. My heart pounds not from fear, but from a mix of excitement and anger. Years of being looked down on, mocked, and pushed to the sidelines. It all ends tomorrow. I'm ready. My lawyer, Karen, sent a confirmation email last night, attaching documents proving my assets. $95 million from the sustainable food startup I poured my sweat, tears, and heart into building. With that wealth, I estimate I'll have about 41% voting power. Enough to overturn any decision my father, Henry Douglas, makes, the man who always thought he alone could dictate the family's fate. I think of my mother, who always believed in me, though she's no longer here to witness this day. She passed away 3 years ago from cancer, leaving a void in my heart that can never be filled. But it was she who taught me that true value lies not in what others think of you, but in what you do when no one is watching. Corey, she once said, holding my hand during the days I struggled with my startup, you are my light. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. Her words now burn like a flame, fueling my resolve. I also think of Uncle Robert, the only one in the family who understands me. Tonight, as we sat under the oak tree, he told me stories of how Grandpa was mocked, called a country bumpkin for daring to dream big. He said I'm more like Grandpa than anyone in this family, and that made me feel like I'm carrying a great responsibility. Not just to save the mansion, but to restore the values Grandpa laid the foundation for. I close my eyes, picturing tomorrow. Dad will stand at the head of the table, smug, pushing for the final vote to sell the mansion. Jake will smirk. Sophia will toss in a few sarcastic remarks. But this time I won't stay silent. This time I'll stand, open my briefcase, and show them who Corey Douglas really is. The morning of the third day, the air in the mansion feels heavy, like the calm before a storm. I wake early, slipping into my light blue dress shirt and jeans, but this time I feel different. I'm no longer the 16-year-old boy kicked out of the meeting room or the 30-year-old man mocked for daring to speak. I'm Corey Douglas, 35, with $95 million and a mission. I meet Uncle Robert in the kitchen where he's brewing coffee. He hands me a mug, his eyes gleaming with confidence. "Today's your day, Corey," he says, his voice low but steady. "Do what your grandfather would have done." I nod, gripping the mug tightly. "I won't let Grandpa down, Uncle. Or you." Uncle Robert smiles, patting my shoulder. "I'll be right behind you. I've got 10% this year, and with your 41%, we're going to make history." I laugh, the first real laugh I've had during this conference, feeling like I'm no longer alone. We eat breakfast in silence, but it's the silence of warriors preparing for battle. I check my briefcase again, ensuring every document is ready. The company valuation report, investment contracts, and the lawyer's confirmation letter. They're all there, like bullets ready to fire. As I step into the main meeting room, the tension is palpable, like a taut string ready to snap. My father sits at the head of the table, a neat stack of resort project documents in front of him. Jake is to his right, whispering something to Sophia, both of them chuckling. Uncle David, Aunt Margaret, and the other relatives are present. I take my seat, the briefcase on my lap like a shield, feeling its weight. Not just physical, but the weight of the years I've silently fought. My father stands, tapping the table lightly to begin. "Today is the final day of the conference," he says, his voice resonating with authority. "We'll hold the official vote on selling the mansion to the Riverside Corporation. I believe this is an opportunity for the Douglas family to move forward, to transform my father's legacy into something modern and profitable. Does anyone have anything to say before we vote?" I glance at Uncle Robert, who gives a subtle nod. This is it. I take a deep breath, stand, and grip my briefcase tightly. "Dad, I have something to say," I state, my voice calm but resolute. The room turns to look at me. Jake raises an eyebrow, his smirk evident. "Oh, Corey, here we go again," he says, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "You gonna tell us about your failed startup or what?" Sophia giggles, covering her mouth with a diamond-ringed hand. "Let him speak, Jake. Maybe he's here to beg for more voting power?" My father crosses his arms, his gaze cold. "Corey, if you're going to repeat that sentimental nonsense about legacy or family values, sit down. We don't have time for that." I don't sit. I lock eyes with him, feeling every ounce of pain and belittlement from the past 10 years rising in my chest. "Dad, I'm not here to talk sentimental nonsense," I say, my voice ringing clear, stronger than I expected. "I'm here to talk about the truth, and I have proof." I open the briefcase, pulling out the meticulously prepared documents. The room falls silent, the only sound the rustle of paper as I place them on the table. This is the valuation report for my company. I begin, my voice steady but powerful. The sustainable food startup you all laughed at. It's currently valued at $250 million. My personal assets as of now are $95 million. According to the conference rules, that gives me 41% voting power. The room seems to stop breathing. Jake's jaw drops, his smirk vanishing. Sophia blinks rapidly as if she can't believe her ears. Uncle David leans forward, trying to get a look at the documents. My father, for the first time in his life, looks disoriented. "What are you talking about, Corey?" he asks, his voice slightly trembling. I slide the documents toward him. "You can verify them. This is the report from an independent auditing firm, investment contracts from some of the biggest funds in Silicon Valley, and a confirmation letter from my lawyer. It's all legitimate. I don't just have 3% voting power like you all thought. I have 41%. Murmurs ripple through the room. Jake shakes his head, his voice faltering. "No way, you're making this up. How could someone like you have $95 million? Someone like me?" I repeat, staring straight at Jake. "You mean someone who doesn't drive a fancy car, doesn't wear expensive suits, doesn't brag at this conference? Someone like me worked day and night, built a company from nothing, and created something the world needs. Sustainable food for the future. You might not believe it, Jake, but these numbers don't lie." I turn to my father, who's still holding the documents, his eyes flickering between anger and disbelief. "Dad, I've stayed silent for years, not because I had nothing to say, but because I wanted to prove myself with actions. Now I have a voice, and I'm going to use it." Before my father can respond, Uncle Robert stands, his voice ringing out strong. "I stand with Corey," he says, looking around the room. "I have roughly 10% voting power, and I'm with my nephew. Together we have 51%, enough to veto any decision in this conference." The room erupts. Sophia shrieks, "Uncle Robert, what are you doing? This is a huge opportunity for the family." Jake slams the table, his face red. "This is a joke, right? Corey, who do you think you are, turning this conference into a circus?" My father raises a hand, signaling for silence. He looks at me, his gaze piercing. "Corey, you think you can walk in here, wave some papers around, and take control? You might have money, but you don't have experience. You don't understand how this family works." I smile, not out of joy, but because I've waited for this moment too long. "Dad, I understand this family better than you think. I understand what Grandpa wanted. A united family, not an arena for boasting. And I'm here to protect that. I veto the proposal to sell the mansion." The murmurs turn into shouts. Jake leaps up, pointing at me. "You can't do this, Dad, say something." My father looks at me, then at the documents, then back at me. I see a flicker in his eyes, not anger, but resignation. He knows the documents I gave him are real. He knows he can't do anything. "Corey," he says, his voice lower, "are you sure you want to do this?" "Absolutely," I reply, not breaking eye contact. "This mansion is Grandpa's legacy. It's not for sale." Uncle Robert claps, breaking the tension. "Well done, Corey. I'm proud of you." The room descends into chaos. Sophia storms away from the table, muttering something about me ruining the family. Jake glares at me with pure hatred, as if I've stolen something from him. Uncle David, Aunt Margaret, and the others whisper among themselves, trying to process what just happened. But my father, he just sits down, silent, clutching the documents tightly. My heart pounds, but not from fear. It's the feeling of victory, of liberation. I did it. I reclaimed my voice, and I protected my grandfather's legacy. After the meeting, Uncle Robert pulls me into the garden, hugging me tightly. "You did it, Corey," he says, his eyes sparkling. "Your grandfather's smiling somewhere." I laugh, feeling a weight lifted off my shoulders. My father, Jake, and the others won't accept defeat easily. They'll try to regain control. But this time, I'm ready. I have Uncle Robert, I have my wealth, and most importantly, I have faith in what my grandfather taught me. Back in my room, I open an email from my lawyer confirming that my documents have been notarized and are indisputable. I look out at the garden where my grandfather's oak trees still stand tall. "Thank you, Grandpa," I whisper. "I did it." Even now, as I place my hand on my chest, I can still feel my heart racing, but it's no longer the rhythm of tension. It's the feeling of liberation, of someone who has walked through fire and emerged unscathed. I did what I've dreamed of for the past 10 years. I stood up to my family, faced my father, Henry Douglas, and reclaimed my voice. I protected my grandfather's mansion, the legacy he built with his entire life. But as moonlight streams through the window, I know this victory is only the first step. The Douglas family is not a place that forgives or changes easily, and I've just stirred a hornet's nest. A gentle knock at the door pulls me from my thoughts. Uncle Robert stands there, still in his simple dress shirt, his kind smile and eyes gleaming with pride. "You okay, Corey?" he asks, stepping into the room. I'm not sure, Uncle," I reply with a faint smile. "I just shocked the entire family, but I don't know what happens next." Uncle Robert sits on the wooden chair by the window, looking out at the garden. "You did the right thing," he says, his voice low but steady. "Henry and Jake may be angry, but they can't deny the truth. You've proven you're not just a Douglas, you carry your grandfather's spirit." His words warm me, as if a part of Grandpa is still alive in this room. But I also feel a new pressure. I didn't just veto the sale of the mansion. I challenged the order my father has built over 2 decades, and I know he won't let this go easily. The next morning, the air in the mansion is heavier than ever. I walk into the dining room, usually filled with laughter and the clinking of wine glasses, but today it's nearly silent. Sophia sits in a corner, scrolling through her phone, but her eyes dart toward me, no longer carrying their usual mockery. Uncle David and Aunt Margaret are whispering, stopping the moment I enter. Jake is absent, probably off somewhere, trying to digest yesterday's shock. And my father. He sits at the head of the table, holding a coffee mug, his gaze cold as ice. "Sit down, Corey," he says, his voice devoid of emotion. I pull out a chair, sitting down, feeling as if the entire room is waiting for me to speak. But I don't. I want to see what my father will do. After a suffocating silence, he speaks. "Yesterday you put on quite a show," he says, his tone even but laced with bitterness. $95 million, 41% voting power. You've been hiding from this family for a long time, Corey. I don't know whether to be proud or angry. I meet his eyes, keeping my voice calm. "Dad, I wasn't hiding. I was doing my work like Grandpa did. I'm not here to boast. I'm here to protect what matters." My father snorts, shaking his head. "Protect? What do you think you're protecting, my father's legacy, or are you just trying to prove you're better than me?" His words cut like a knife, but I don't let them shake me. "I'm not trying to prove anything to you," I reply. "I just want to do what's right. This mansion isn't for sale. It's where Grandpa wanted us to come together, not tear apart." Jake walks in at that moment, interrupting our exchange. He's wearing an expensive polo shirt, but his face is red, his eyes burning with anger. "You think you've won, don't you, Corey?" he says, his voice trembling with rage. "You think you can waltz in here, wave some papers, and control the whole family? You're nothing." "Jake," Uncle Robert speaks up from the corner, his voice sharp. "That's enough. Corey did what you didn't dare. Stand up for what's right. If you don't like it, take a look at yourself." Jake turns to Uncle Robert, about to retort, but my father raises a hand, signaling silence. "Jake, sit down," he says coldly. "Corey, I'm not going to argue about this anymore. You have 41%, and with Robert, you have 51%. You won the vote. But don't think this is over." I nod, holding his gaze. "I understand, Dad, but I'm not backing down either." That afternoon, as I stand in the garden looking at the oak trees my grandfather planted, my father appears unexpectedly. He stands beside me, hands in his pockets, his eyes fixed on the horizon. It's the first time in years I've seen him without a suit. just a simple dress shirt and khaki pants. There's something different about him. No longer the usual domineering presence, but a tiredness, almost a vulnerability. "Corey," he begins, his voice softer than usual. "Do you know why I wanted to sell the mansion?" I look at him, waiting. "For the money?" I ask, not hiding my skepticism. He shakes his head. "Not just the money. I wanted this family to move forward. I wanted us to be a bigger name, not just in Ware, but across the country. My father, your grandfather, he did great things, but he always limited himself. I didn't want us to be stuck in the past." I stay silent for a moment, weighing his words. It's the first time I've heard him talk about Grandpa without arrogance, but I also know he's misunderstood the meaning of legacy. "Dad," I say, "moving forward doesn't mean selling what makes us who we are. Grandpa didn't want us to just be a big name. He wanted us to be a family, a real family." My father looks at me, his eyes wavering. Then he says something I didn't expect. "Corey, I want you to work with me. You have wealth, you have vision. We could take Douglas Lumber to new heights together. I'll give you a position in the company." His offer stuns me. Part of me wants to believe this is his way of acknowledging me, of finally seeing my worth. But another part, the part that endured years of being belittled, tells me this is just his attempt to regain control. "Dad, I appreciate the offer," I say cautiously, "but I have my own path, and I'm going to keep following it." He presses his lips together, says nothing more, and walks away. I watch his figure disappear behind the trees, feeling both relief and a heavy weight. Jake, unlike my father, doesn't take a direct approach. That evening, as I'm preparing to leave the mansion for Atlanta, he knocks on my door. "Corey," he says, a smile on his face, but his eyes cold. "Congratulations. Who would have thought my little brother was a millionaire?" I look at him, not responding immediately. "Thanks, Jake," I say evenly. "Something on your mind?" He steps into the room, sitting on a chair uninvited. "Look, Corey, I don't want us to be at odds. We're brothers, right? Maybe I was a bit harsh over the years, but now that you've got money, we could work together. I have some business ideas, and with your wealth..." I cut him off. "Jake, if you want to work together, it's not because of my money. You never cared about what I do, about my startup, or why I live the way I do. Don't pretend now." Jake stiffens, his smile fading. "You're still bitter, huh?" he says, his voice lowering. "Fine, Corey, but don't think you can control this family forever. Dad will find a way to take back power, and I'll be on his side." He stands and leaves without another word. I watch him go, feeling a familiar disappointment. I had hoped Jake might change, that he'd see me as a brother, not a rival. But perhaps with Jake, that will never happen. Amid the tension with my father and Jake, Uncle Robert is the one bright spot. After Jake leaves, he finds me on the back porch where I'm standing, looking at the oak trees. "You did something great, Corey," he says, his voice full of pride. "I know what it's like to be overlooked. I've lived in Henry's shadow for decades, but today, you gave me hope that the younger generation can change this family." I smile, touched by his words. "I couldn't have done it without you," I say. "You stood up for me when no one else did." Uncle Robert shakes his head. "No, Corey, you led the way. I was just your supporter. But I believe that with you, this family can rediscover what we've lost. The values my father, your grandfather, built." We sit there talking about Grandpa, about the days when the Douglas family was a true family. Uncle Robert tells me stories of how Grandpa helped others, not just in the family but in Ware, from funding scholarships for poor kids to building a community library. "That's his real legacy," he says, "and you, Corey, are carrying it forward." As the conference ends, I leave the mansion with mixed feelings. I've won, but I know this family is still divided. My father, despite his offer to work together, remains domineering. Jake is clearly plotting something, and Sophia and the others still look at me with suspicion. But I'm no longer afraid. I've proven my worth, not just to the family, but to myself. Uncle Robert walks me to my truck, the old Ford pickup still standing alone in the parking lot. "What's your next move?" he asks. I look back at the mansion where my grandfather's oak trees still reach skyward. "I want to make this place mean something," I say. "Not just a house, but a place to carry on Grandpa's legacy, supporting young people like I once was to chase their dreams." Uncle Robert nods, his eyes shining. "I'll be with you, Corey. Always." I start the truck, feeling like a new chapter is beginning. I've saved the mansion, but I know the real journey, restoring the Douglas family and my grandfather's legacy, has just begun, and I'm ready to see it through to the end.